Hello. Thank you, Karen Haynes, for being here today via Zoom for your interview. I'm very excited to finally meet you after some of our communications through messaging. Let's get started.
Okay. Yes.
So, during our communications, you told me you were based in South Texas for quite some time, but you have made a recent move to Ohio. What are some ways your specific practices contributed to the greater good of the environment while you were based in Texas and even now in Ohio?
Stewardship is really important. And the more of us who participate, the better, more vibrant and healthy the planet will be. Building berms and swales to keep the water on the land more so in the hill country in Texas than up here, where drainage is more important. And so slope and managing that, putting increasingly water levers further down slope so that they can draw on the water before it leaves the property. Water, 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 water is life. Soil composting. So it's all about stewardship, taking care of the land, building the soil, no pesticides, chemicals, nonsense.
Great. So from our communications, I've sensed you're passionate about the importance of biodiversity within the soil. How does this contribute to the health of the soil and the production of a better good?
Well, it's essential. So much degradation has gone on. Pollution, poison. I should say, I do not confuse industrial agriculture with farming and farming with homesteading practices. And it's all really a matter of scale, except for the industrial ag. Now, that was really touching on the notion of stewardship and respect for the planet and the environment.
Okay. So I'm sure there are some considerable differences between your methods of sustainable farming and farming methods that are more so profit driven. Are you able to tell me about some of those differences? Is there a difference in machinery?
Yes, absolutely. I don't use massive columbines. All of my tools are handheld, battery operated tiller for certain kinds of operations. There are many organic permaculture, biodynamic methods that one can use. So, for example, biodynamics highly recommends all this preparations to do with chamomile and burying bones and all sorts of other strange and interesting practices, which I have seen. But for me, I don't concoct that way. I just sort of plant a lot. I do a lot of companion planting so that individuals can develop symbiotic relations. So corn, beans, rice, or some of the other sisters, the amaranth and squash, beans are very often essential part of that because they help to draw and fix nitrogen. But then so too do a number of other plants in the legume family. So again, it's the working with and looking at the symbiotic relationships that you can develop between the plants so that they help to nurture each other. And it's very much a matter of scale. Very, very, very much. There's so many other things that we can do, that I have done, that I will do, such as building these sorts of tunnels that will run in between your rows and letting your chickens go in between the rows so that they eat all the buglies. One's unfortunate enough to meet up with the chickens. But they scratch and they claw and they poop, and you can either till that in at the end of the season. Chicken poop tends to be what they call very hot, nitrogen rich, so you don't want to have a whole lot of it, so you've got to move the tunnels around frequently, which means of course that you're walking the property or the rows and the fields and the beds and the gardens very frequently, so you can keep on top of and monitor constantly what's going on in the garden. Who's doing well, who's not, who wants what. Stewardship and the level of intention, involvement, engagement, and scale.
And I guess quite literally working with the grain and not against the grain.
Quite,
Yes.
quite, quite. Yeah, my chickens
Great.
don't get a whole lot of grain.
Yeah, I can really imagine. So What would you say the effects of mass production and the commodification of goods can sometimes have on the approach that some farmers may take in yielding their goods? Maybe as you've spoken before on pesticides, overtilling, monocropping, those sorts of things.
Yes, I believe that greed is the root of all evil. And profiteering, it's an appropriate incentive, but when it's everything for profit to make money, you're not paying attention to the stewardship aspects and the long-term responsibility we have to work with our land and develop sustainable solutions.
Okay. What can you say about the importance of buying locally grown, sustainably produced organic goods in relation to the concept of ethnobotany?
Support your local farmers because, of course, there really are three kinds. There are the capitalists, the people who work for institutional organizations, and then there are people like me who are literally trying to make a living at it. And each one, hopefully when organically driven, will be using very similar practices to help to create nutritional food. Preaching to the choir there, I'm sure. Ethnobotany to me is you've got contemporary and paleo or historical prehistoric ethnobotany, looking at foodways. It's like preserving language. It's going back to our cultural heritage. And each of us can dig into grandma's cuisine, mom's pumpkin pie recipes, and how these things were done, where they came from, and that's all really important. I love everybody's individual diversity, honor everyone's origin stories, being able to relate back to our own ancestors, no matter who or where, I think is really important. I think, though, we have to remember, particularly in the New World, the North American continent, that there was so much plundering and the taking of many, 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 many things from this continent back to the European continent, including plants, where they were nurtured, some right away, some took a lot longer. Look at the history of the tomato, so-called love apple. Now we can't imagine Italian pizza without tomato sauce. But tomatoes, of course, are a product of the New World. New to Europeans, not new to people who were here, the first peoples. But in that process, we've now had hundreds and hundreds of years of this Columbian exchange where plants have been going back and forth. The originals come to Europe, Europeans tinker, tinker, tinker. Not that first peoples weren't also doing any kind of hybridizing, specialization, selecting for the most vibrant, dense, highly productive plants that they had growing, thereby constantly improving their yields in their crops. What is considered a native may or may not be. What is considered an import may just be a tinkered, hybridized native that is returning to our continent. Just becoming aware of the global patterns of exchange, I think, is very informative for people to begin to look at heritage, colonial responsibility, plundering, and the genuine facts of life and history. How do we do that? We eat. We all eat. So every time we eat, if we look at what we're eating, where did it come from? How did it get here? Who grew it? Again, you're talking about the contemporary farmers, growers, producers, all that heritage that has come. So you have your heirloom plants, open pollinated, that come with more personalized stories. But then there's that whole branch of heritage plants, I think, that have gone back and forth through the continents. And we should look at and recognize those too. But ethnobotany to me is contemporary. We need to feast more. We need to celebrate our food and each other and be more engaged and involved, I think, more self-aware.
Very well put. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Didn't even get into the sustainable practices of the ancients everywhere, all over the world, who were sustaining huge populations, and we're being astounded by LIDAR and the discoveries there of the number of fields and managed fields and different ways of managing fields that were exceptionally effective. And I read some of the old histories of the explorers, and they're all buttoned up in these massive wool suits going, "Oh, the tropics are horrible. How can anybody live or grow down here?" Yeah, we'll take off half your clothes. It won't be that bad. My dad is himself actually British, so I have actually had to endure traditional British food. And I understand why they had to go out and conquer to find spice. I mean, even that too goes way back with the Enclosure Acts and all sorts of social dynamics and the political economy of food growing, which I think we should look at very carefully from historic and contemporary perspectives, because land ownership and tenure have a lot to do with the relationships that we bond with the land, so that there are different relationships that are generated by slavery, by land ownership, by the Enclosure Acts, all of which takes tremendous import, relatively difficult to diagnose archaeologically or ethnographically, but certainly worth looking into. So we see these LIDAR maps and we are astounded at the volumes, humongous numbers of people who were actually living in these different kinds of environments and fed pretty well for the most part for thousands of years. Now that is sustainable agriculture.
I agree.
How do we look and learn and adapt now traditional ecological knowledge into our current life ways and ways of growing, so that we too can sustain over the long haul? Because we're not going to be able to live on a poison planet for much longer.
Yes. Yes, I
Which boggles my mind. How can you think you can use killing chemicals on your food and it's not going to have a health impact?
Yes, exactly. I feel the same way. The origin of pesticides is highly questionable. So,
oh, it's evil. It's evil.
yeah.
After World War I and World War II, they had all this leftover defoliant chemicals, especially after napalm in Vietnam. And they said, well, what do we do with it? Oh, I know. It kills plants. Let's use it for an herbicide.
Yeah.
Feed it to people, and then wonder why there's an astronomical number of autism cases and bad health. But again, just recognizing where our food comes from, who grows it, how it's grown, can be a real eye opener. And once your eyes are open, it's hard to unsee.
I agree. I completely agree. So, what are some ways individuals within their community can make a positive impact on their environment, even if on a smaller scale for less ideal living arrangements? For example, I live in an apartment right now. What are some ways we can make a difference on a smaller scale?
Okay, do you have a balcony?
I live on a bottom floor, so I do have somewhat of a patio.
Good. There you go. Then you don't have to move.
Yeah.
Anybody can grow even cherry tomatoes.
Mhm.
And if you don't have enough sunlight for that, do lettuce and spinach and cilantro and herbs so that you get those wonderful fresh greens.
Yes.
And yeah, and then you really know where it came from.
I have a sage bush outside that I'm very proud of because I've had it for 2 years now, grown by seed, and it's flowering for the very first time. And so to feed from the fruits of your labor. Yeah, well.
All right, so that's my balcony story. So homeowners association, just go in, take them over, make new rules, because you're not going to get them to alter their expectations of lawn, neat and prim, so that it's not as if it would be easy or really very feasible with your neighbors to do in prairie gardens or native plants or anything that is viewed as less than manicured. And nature is not manicured. Very ordered, very organized, but not necessarily manicured and neat. That is cultivated land, property. So depending on where you live, there are different kinds of approaches. But I think community building, you can always join a community garden. There are lots of them. I know less yet about Ohio, but I'm learning. Shop at farmers markets. Very, very, very important. Don't just say you want to and show up with your Whataburger cup of soda. It's a thing in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Things like neighborhood tool sheds where not everybody uses the same tool at the same time. That's a consumerist tactic that gets us all into Lowe's and Home Depot so that we're all buying, buy. We don't all need to buy shovels. If there was a community tool shed, there could be 2 or 3. That's more than enough to go around for this Saturday at 3 o'clock. Just bring them back clean. There are also seed libraries, very important. Many libraries now are beginning to develop them, and those represent hyperlocal seed banks, and that's just essential for resilient development of vital plants that we can use and grow. Plant swaps, food hubs, stop leaf blowing, stop, save your leaves, pile them up, put them in the windy corner. All kinds of pollinators love to overwinter or nest underneath those leaves. They're so valuable. And again, you're not going to get away with this in a HOA, so don't live in an HOA.
Yeah.
Incorporate native plants wherever you can. There are 3 or 4 brand new native plant nurseries all around San Antonio. Wetmore Shirts.
Oh, yes.
Join your native plant society, your native herb society. It's not just crazy old plant ladies. There are all sorts of interesting people in these groups, and they have all kinds of resources for you and really knowledgeable people that you can tap into. Remove invasives like milkweed tuberosa. Bye at the nursery. They're actually not a variety that our world famous migrating monarchs actually host on. They host on all the other milkweeds. There are a number of different types of milkweed that will flower spring, summer, later in the fall, still coordinating with the migration patterns for the monarchs. But monarchs are not the only ones who feed and host. So too the queens, the viceroys. There are a number of other more stay-at-home butterflies and caterpillars that make use of those as well. Really go for the natives, the Asperula, Herod. There are lots of them.
All right. So additionally, are there any current ecological projects you're working on that you'd be willing to share some details about?
Yes, I'm very excited to say I am working on a northern version of a swallowtail sanctuary. So that will include natives, nectars, heritage plants, the ones that have been back and forth over the Atlantic and Pacific, the heirloom plants, but open pollinated, because it's very important when trying to bring pollinators in and save seed, which of course is another very, very important component of sustainable ag. So I'm growing a lot of seed. I brought some up from Texas. Some survived. Some is being really picky. Some is like, what is this, winter? You didn't tell us about this part.
Something you don't get very often over here.
But it's expected. When we go down to 19 degrees for 3 days in the hill country, that's not expected. That kills. That kills.
Yes, it
It's,
has.
yep. Oh,
I had half of my garden wiped out.
it's really sad because it is a lot of work. Like, people don't realize it's not magic and poof, now you have these big, beautiful plants like you see at Lowe's. Yeah, no, they take weeks and months to grow. And at that point, talking about nurturing and cultivating. And then many perennials that will come back year after year take at least 1 year to get established. And then it's like, oh, there you are. And year 2, oh, there you are. And then year 3, there you are. So they take a long time to get established and really show off their vitality. So it makes a lot of sense to interplant, do the succession planting so that you have many similar types of plants blooming throughout the entire growing season for all the different butterflies and pollinators. Did you know that there are like 4,000 native bees on the North American continent alone? Like, I had
That is like, it's
right?
amazing.
Most of them are ground. They live in the ground. They're solitary creatures. Although I've seen some studies recently that imply that honeybees have gotten loose, and there are a lot of them out there that are not managed in these industrial agricultural styles, or even the more wonderful smaller scale backyard beehive colonies. So many different creatures involved in this pollination process. And of course, 1 out of every 3 bites, and just to quote that wonderful statistic, that most of us eat, even on a Whataburger, come because of pollinators. There would be no ketchup, no French fries, no lettuce and tomato and all that other wonderful good stuff without pollinators. These plants rely on them, the fruit relies on them to set. So we need to be far more mindful and respectful of the full range, not only of butterflies. The monarch is not the only pretty thing in the sky, so to speak. There are oodles of wonderful creatures who live in our environment, and we need to nurture them all. So that's what I'm looking to do, is build a garden, what we call the mother plants, that you can then take cuttings from and clone, basically, or do seed saving. Also very important. They all take so much time, patience, hope, joy, sorrow, cry more than once, laugh a lot.
Yes. I agree. Yes. Well, thank you so much. Your passion for ecological matters is very evident. So I'd like to thank you again, as I have before, for your generosity with your knowledge. I'm hopeful that your words can help change people's perception on their food and its relationship with the planet.
Feasting, we should all be feasting. Friendsgiving, feasting. They don't have to be massive, just even wee gatherings, but it's just so important to develop those community relationships around food the way that humans have been doing for millennia.
Yes. Thank you for feeding your passion by sustainably feeding your community. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you for giving me this interview with you, Karen Haynes. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Are we set?
I think we're set. If you have anything else, like any message you want to leave us with, other than that, I think we're set.
Grow well, grow happy, keep going. Don't give up.
Great. Thank you so much.
You be well.